So today we welcome Rebecca from New Brunswick, Canada, and she is going to talk to us about an aspect of her life story that focuses and centers on the chance to make one choice. And the making of that choice, her decision, was going to be the determiner for how the rest of her life was going to go. She's looking at it from a perspective of health. She's looking at it from a perspective of personal growth and her own spirituality. So, Rebecca, we welcome you today to Quintessential Experiences. Marion, unfortunately, cannot be with us tonight, but you have Mark and I at your behest. So, go ahead and give us some backstory about what your life had been like leading up to this particular life event that ended up being a vector shift for you.
Thank you, Angeli. Thank you, Mark, for having me. So my story began in 2015. I was a busy mom and I worked full-time as a speech therapist at the university. And for the 3 years prior to 2015, I had been working very hard because my middle child had a traumatic brain injury. She began university and we discovered she was in pre-law. She was all set to be a lawyer and we discovered she couldn't read, she couldn't focus, she couldn't remember. And so I spent 3 years working very hard to try and fix her. Over time, we were successful, and now 8 years later, she's doing fine. But it was a long road and very stressful because those of us who are parents know that our children are our dearest, are just the most precious part of our lives. And when they're in pain, we're in pain. And when they're struggling, and looking for answers, we'll go to the ends of the earth to try and help them. And so right. I had been raised in the Presbyterian church, and I had a really positive experience. I loved my Sunday school teachers, but I'd always been kind of, the notion of a God who allows for bad things to happen to children and to good people, just never sat very well with me. Like if I had had any faith that the world was, a friendly and safe place, I kind of lost a lot of my faith in that. In 2015, my husband and I were hiking. I got bit by a tick on the hike, and a week later, I got really, really sick. Literally, I was on the couch. I had no energy. It felt like I had the flu every day. The other symptom I had was that my anxiety immediately, where it had been kind of here, just barely under control, went through the roof. And then that progressed to depression. And so the only thing the doctors could tell me was that, yes, you have severe anxiety and depression. More in-depth testing with another doctor, and it turned out I did have the bacteria in my system. So in the end, we think it was Lyme because Lyme is really weird, and my brain was affected. So anyway, I was very sick, and I got to 18 months. I just hit my rock bottom, and I said, okay, God, you know what? I'm done. And if I'm supposed to get better from this, I'm leaving it to you. But the next morning, all of a sudden, I heard it felt like a voice inside my head, giving me a list of things to do. And I felt like I had heard a voice before, but you think, oh, this is my imagination. This is no. But then there was the part of me that felt like not like my imagination. And so I got this list and I wrote all the things down because I had also made this deal with God, right? So I thought, well, you know what? You better be open. And the list I got were things to do, and they all looked very reasonable. One thing was to go to confession, and I'm Presbyterian. And so so that was something. And
that would have taken a while.
Yeah, exactly. Now it makes me wonder who was the voice.
that was intimidating. But another thing was to call my father, with whom I had not had any contact for 25 years.
That's right.
That was intimidating. But the therapist in me was looking at these things and thinking, you know what, these things actually do make sense. I can see why these would be healing for me. So I thought, okay, this makes sense. I'm going with the voice. And so, then another thing that happened was my kids all flew home within days. And they called a meeting, and basically they said, Mom, this is it. We've had it. And we want say in your care. And we're tired of you trying internet remedies and blah, 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 and self-treating things. And we want say. And I
said, this was their intervention.
This was their intervention. I said, okay. And they were surprised. And they sent me to a doctor at Northwestern University in Chicago, who's an integrative medicine practitioner.
Yes.
And he said, you have to address your childhood. You have to address, because apparently 75% of people who develop chronic illness have experienced childhood trauma, which I had. But never really, I kind of dismissed it.
Right.
And then the other thing was he had me start acupuncture. And so I did those things, and I still didn't see, my energy hadn't come back, but I just did it. I just went along with it. Right. And then what happened? So now we're leading up. So I've had a little bit of this voice, but not really seen much yet, many results. Okay. But then my daughter had just started a new job, and she was being placed in a city, a 10-hour drive from where she was doing her training. And she just had a new puppy, and she needed help to drive from where she was training to the city. I mean, just even to hold the puppy. And I'm the only one available. And I really, really wanted to help her, right?
Of course.
And all I could think was, I was worried about being a burden, because at this point, I still only had about an hour of good in me every day in the morning.
Oh my gosh.
And then I'd just be exhausted for the rest of the day. But I thought, you know what? Worst comes to worst, I am a puppy holder in the car, right?
Okay. Yep.
I thought and part of it was, I just felt like I had made a choice to try and trust. And I wanted to do this, and I thought, okay, God, I'm going to trust in you to help me do this thing. So anyway, we have a day before we leave, and I thought, okay, one thing I can do for her is do her laundry, because she'd been there for 10 days. And so I have enough energy. I can do that in the morning. So anyway, I go and go to a laundromat, and we're getting close to where the miracle is coming. We go to the laundromat, and I put the laundry in the machine, and I take the puppy, and I think, okay, we'll go to a park across from the laundromat, and we're walking. And then all of a sudden I feel a plop behind me, and I turn around, and he's just laying there on the cement. He's done, right? Refusing. Yep. Anyway, and all of a sudden across the street, I see this man staring at me, and I'm just kind of freaked out, because he's staring at me, and I kind of look at him, and he keeps staring at me. I pick up the puppy. He's still looking at me. And the voice pops back into my head, and it says, because this guy is behind a little strip mall going through the garbage, and a voice and the voice says, you need to go over to him, and you need to give him money.
Yeah.
And Angelique, I just stopped, and I'm like, okay, my brain has not been working well for 18 months. At times I have been a little bit, what I felt like I was a little bit crazy, over the top with, at one point when I was near my rock bottom, I was thinking about suicide. So I'm sitting there in my mind thinking, okay, either this is the voice of God, maybe I'm becoming delusional, because the normal me would not entertain the idea of approaching a man and giving the money. Like, I'd send money to the local homeless shelter.
Sure.
That makes sense, right? But I'm alone. And so it's not the way I would do things. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm making up the voice to give myself permission to do something I would normally be too scared to do. All of this is going through, right? So I'm thinking, I've crossed a line. So I'm just kind of walking and thinking, how do I figure this out? And so I thought, okay, I'm going to ask for a sign. And so I said, okay, God, if this is actually you and not me being delusional or imagining or making up something, I need a sign. Anyway, so I turn around and I'm like, okay, God, ready. Well, there in the strip mall, because now I'm on the front of it, there was a window.
Yep.
And it's a hairdresser's shop.
Okay.
And in the window, it says, my daughter's name, Creative Cuts. My daughter has a traditional Scottish name. She's named after my husband's mother, who's Scottish. And I've only ever met one other woman, and I'm well-traveled in the world with her name. And so I'm like, oh my God.
There it was.
There it was.
There was your sign.
And there was my sign. I'm like,
what are the
oh,
chances?
and the thing was, like, it was so real. It went from the voice, which, still thinking it's my imagination, to that's really tangible. And the mathematical probability of me seeing my daughter's name on a sign is almost this in like Southwestern Indiana. Okay. And so I decided that's that. And I'm like, okay, God, I have no idea what I'm going to say to this guy. So I need you to give me the words. So anyway, we go.
Yeah.
I approach him. He looks up, he's surprised to see me, and I give him money, and he sees that it's quite a bit of money. And he says, really? And I said, yes. And he said, thank you. My anxiety turns into just like total sadness, right? So sad. Like, this big, strong, lovely looking young man should not be in this situation. I just felt overwhelmed with mother compassion for this guy.
Yeah.
And so we talked, and he said, you have a really cute puppy. And I said, and then I realized he wasn't looking at me. He's looking at Leo, the puppy, right? And then he says, my dog died 3 weeks ago. And I said, I'm so sorry. And
that explains it.
Right. And so then I just said, basically, I ended the conversation with, God bless you and take care. And that was that. And I walked away. But then what happened was Leo and I get the laundry, we go back to the hotel, and it's lunchtime. And I'd had a pretty emotionally involved morning, right?
Yes.
Plus a walk around the park.
Right.
And we're sitting on the bed, and I realized I am not exhausted. In fact, it just all of a sudden I realized I am not tired. I'm not tired.
Wait a minute.
And I hadn't even, it dawns on me, and I think, oh my goodness. And I thought, this can't, it just felt like this can't be happening. It's noon. I'm always exhausted by noon. Anyway, then my daughter calls, and she says she had been getting sick. And she said, Mom, could you get us supper? Because I am really sick. I know you're probably exhausted, but if you still have the energy, if you could pick it up now, and we'll just put it in the fridge. I went and got supper. And on the way back from picking up supper, I'm driving, and the voice pops in again.
Oh.
And I'm driving down the road, and there's a Walmart sign, and the voice says, turn into the Walmart. I'm like, okay, you know what? You're either in the game or you're not. I made this decision when I surrendered, 2 months or a month and a half before that, I was I'd asked God to guide me. And so, you know what, we're just going with this. Even though this is totally not in my background experience, we're just going to go with it. And the voice says, go to the book section. So go to the books. I go to the book section, and I'm just looking, I'm thinking, well, we'll see what happens next. And the book, and I'm kind of going along. That's it. And so I pull this book off the shelf. Okay, that's the one. So I buy it, bring it back to the hotel. Still not tired. I end up taking the dog for another walk because I think, you know what, we may as well tire him out. It's a religious book, and a religious inspirational called The Power of I Am, by an author that I didn't recognize, but other people I think would recognize from an evangelical background. I mean, I wasn't really looking at it. I just picked what I was directed to pick. And the story that I opened to was a story about the Greek race in which the runners run with their torch lit.
Okay.
And the winner of the race is the one who not only finishes first, but finishes first with his flame never having gone out.
Right.
And so I read this story, and it's all about like finishing with grace, just living your life fully right to the end.
Yep.
And it well, obviously it evoked a lot of emotion in me. And it also made me think of my girlfriend who was back in Canada. She was all like me, American, like you know, Canadians living in the
Based out of
US.
America. Yes.
Right. And parents are back in Canada. And
Yes.
her dad was she was nursing with her mom, her dad, in the end stages of cancer. And it made me think of her because her two boys were runners. It's just like her dad, because her dad, right to the end, carried his light. Like he was a light for others. He just, he continued on. He was in his garden till he could no longer be in his garden. And he was on his deathbed. Anyway, so I'm thinking of her. Phone rings.
Oh, don't tell me it's her.
It's her. The phone rings. It's her. I'm like, oh my God. And you know, we hadn't talked in probably 6 weeks because she's with her dad in palliative care. And I said, you know, I said to her, I said, I can't believe it's you. I was just thinking about you. And she said, I was just thinking about you. She said, I just had to get out for a walk. And I just felt like I just needed to talk to somebody. She said, I just needed to talk to you. And so she's crying and she says, cancer is awful. She says, you know, she said, people are coming to say goodbye. And she said, and Papa, she said, he had asked me to photocopy, you know, this one section out of this book that he found very comforting called Jesus Calling. And I had read that too during my illness and I found it comforting.
Okay.
And the one section was on forgiveness. And every person who came to visit him, he gave them a copy of this and said, the most important thing you can do for yourself, for your health, for your family, for yourself is to forgive. And so he just, that was what he was doing on his deathbed, was preaching, you know, just teaching about forgiveness. And anyway, so she's crying and I'm crying. And I said, well, I have this story that I think that might bring you some comfort. And it made me think of your dad, you know, running with his torch lit right to the end. And so I sent it to her. And then she emails me back the next day that it was so wonderful for them. Right. And so anyway, so this happens. I still have energy at 10 o'clock that night. I mean, this is after this kind of a conversation too. And I went to bed thinking, you know what? Thank you, God, for this day. And I had zero expectation. I just thought this was a gift. This was just a gift. And the next day, my daughter and I drove and it was raining. And because of her TBI, she has problems with windshield wipers.
Right.
I end up driving the 10 hours.
Oh my gosh, you?
No problem. Oh. And we get there and my daughter's like, oh my goodness, Mom. And the next, so it goes on and there are more miracles that happen that I won't talk about. What the gift I got was for my, you know what, the big gift was my daughter is now fine, right? Like that was the thing that's the only thing I cared about. I didn't really care about myself. But then I got this gift of being able to trust that, you know what, we're more than just these physical beings on this planet, that life isn't actually out to get us, that we can actually trust that. And the thing I've learned is that each one of these difficult circumstances has actually grown me and taught me, grown my kids, taught my kids. And that, as Louise Hay says, she's another person I love, you know what, all is well, you are safe, and trust that everything's for your highest and best good, and it's all going to work out. And I have slowly, because I'm a slow learner, it's taken me a couple of years of intense spiritual study, but I'm at the place now where I don't have anxiety and fear anymore. I trust, and life is good, because even when we have had problems, I've had relapses with my health when I haven't taken care of myself. You know what? The universe will give you a little reminder lesson when you need it.
That's right.
So anyway, but you know what? What is awesome is that I now have this really lovely connection. And when I need some help, I can ask for it. And sometimes I even get, actually, if I ask for it, I'll get direction. And sometimes, I always do, either through the voice, or it'll be in a song, or it'll be in words that a friend says to me. Like often the voice will say, listen, and then I listen, pay attention to what comes out of their mouth next. And
And
there's
it probably
something,
has some
and
answer for
and it
you.
gives me the answer. And so I feel so lucky that basically God in the universe beat me down good so that I can spend the next, no, but the next, because I'm stubborn, Angeli. I would have stuck to my
Okay.
own ways. And now instead of living a life of fear and anxiety and being worried about my children from here till, whenever I passed on, I now actually can relax,
That's probably the
enjoy.
best gift.
It is, and have fun. And it's so nice for my husband because he gets this refurbished wife who actually can relax and have fun. And we do have fun. And now sometimes he gets more worried about the kids than I do.
Isn't that interesting?
So anyway, so that's my story.
Rebecca 2.0. Wow, that's remarkable. Mark, I'm sure you have a necessary question.
Well, it's like buckle up and hold on.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Well, it's all the gloves are off and it messes with your kids. I know where you're at in that respect, and you certainly do. You certainly do get shown whenever you need to work on a little thing here or there. I'm pretty familiar with that aspect of it as well.
I pulled through several things while you were telling your story. From an Akashic perspective, I asked who was the voice that you were hearing? Who was the voice that asked you to go to confession? Who was the voice that asked you to reconnect with your father? Was it the same voice that was asking you to give money to the man you saw across the street? Is it the same voice all the time? Okay.
I'm interested to know that.
Yes. And so as you were telling the story about your friend's father carrying his torch for forgiveness right through to the very last. And I think that is where the secret of this whole experience and the whole conversation potentially could lie. You were asked to go to confession. You were also asked to reconnect with your father, who you hadn't seen or had been estranged from, I believe, for almost 2 decades. This was actually the piece of the puzzle for which everything, 2012, 2015, 2017, all of your phases, as you had shared with them and are sharing with us now, is also unfolding exactly the way it is. Because are you in touch with your father?
So I live in my father's house. I just sold my house, right? Okay. And my husband and I are making my dad's house our home base here in Canada so that I can support him and my mom, who have been divorced for over 30 years.
Right.
They still, for a long time, it was extremely inconvenient that they were in the same town, but now it's extremely convenient that they're in the same town. And so he's in the nursing home. And when this pandemic is over, then he will be able to come home to his home again because I'm here. And so I've been supporting him for the last 3 years. And it has been so healing for and empowering for my dad and for my mom and for me and for my siblings, some of whom don't have contact with my dad and some who do.
Yeah.
And so
I guess it isn't any wonder that you're in your father's proximity, that you are in his life again. Not just in his proximity, but you are in his life again. Could you tell us honestly, where do you feel you're at on carrying that torch, the path to forgiveness? Because I think this for you is the ultimate, not the penultimate. It is the ultimate test for forgiveness in this earthly life that is yours, Rebecca.
One of the signs that I saw literally in a person's garage where they were putting snow tires on my car, and they had on the wall a quote by Teddy Roosevelt, and it says, "Do what you can with what you have where you are." And I got that quote not very long after I had my miracle healing, and while I was which put me on the journey of healing.
Yeah.
And that quote to me speaks to so many different things, but it speaks to the fact that I believe that every single human on this planet, and this is probably because I'm a developmental specialist, so I really believe that we are all people just doing the best we can with what we have.
Yeah.
A lot of us have had a lot of very difficult childhood shaping experiences that put us in really, a position to be abusive. A lot of young children, are raised by parents who are abused, and then they become abusers and they abuse their children. And that cycle is very difficult to stop, but it's not because they don't love their families. It's because their brains have been programmed this way. And I really think that it's been only in the last 2 generations that we have developed techniques to really help people heal from that. Beyond spiritual, techniques that have been used in the past. But anyway, so when it, with regard to my dad and with regard to forgiveness, I honestly, from the depth of my heart, believe that every person on the planet is basically doing the best they can with what they have, where they were. And when you have that perspective, there's nothing to forgive, right? It's just all compassion. It's just all compassion. However,
I suppose you're seeing your own weaknesses in a braid with theirs, because our lives are braided, right? Yeah. So I have my downfall, you have yours. We all have our pitfalls. We all have our triggers, and we all have our best efforts all trying to be made at the same time. So the braid can end up kind of messy at times, but it doesn't mean that the braiding, isn't taking place. So you feel you are on the path of forgiveness, yes?
I think so. Yeah, I really do.
Okay.
What kind of changes have you noticed in you say your husband and your kids are sort of atheists?
Yeah.
Is that still the case, or
yes. But my husband will say, yes, I will spot you. That is quite the coincidence. Because he's been a witness to all these things.
Yeah.
I mean, and he knows the whole story, and he's like, I don't care. You're happy. And that makes me happy, right? And my husband,
that's the bottom line.
My husband, Mark, is basically Stephen's twin, like so easygoing, so like technology minded. I think
very
we're just
sciencey.
Very different brained, totally
very sciencey,
very smart, but totally easygoing. And I am so lucky because he just wants me to be happy, and I'm really lucky. I mean, that's why I'm here. He
is an observance. He's an observance of something that he too doesn't understand, and his being married to you is also part of his getting to grow, right? And I think if we have to see, like you said earlier, if the kid gloves come off once it affects our children, once it starts affecting the people that we love, suddenly we change. And your husband probably sees you now as orders of magnitude healthier than you ever were, orders of magnitude inexplicably happier and more at ease than you ever have been. And if someone like Stephen or Willie could believe in miracles, this would definitely qualify. For them.
And to speak to that, and to your question, Mark, too, about the children as well, like they see a mom who doesn't get worried about stuff anymore, which is, and at my age, like really, I mean, it's so nice for them, right? I mean, they loved me before,
it's just easier.
I'm a lot more fun now.
It's easier for people to be at peace and to express joy.
People see that and they notice and they think, hey, maybe there's something to what she's doing.
That's right. That's eventually what it starts to become. People will see, and they'll want a slice of that pie. If you're looking for a shortcut, the spiritual work is the shortcut. Now, the voice that has been advising you, came from a higher dimension and a higher realm. I want to say it came from 10th dimension Christic force via angelic mode of communication. What has picked up that transmission of that voice now into you as sort of more the regular pathway of communication into you is a spirit guide. And you told me the spirit guide has a name.
So, Mark, my mother reminded me shortly after all of this, which she didn't know about, she said, "Do you remember Cora?" Well, when I was not even 2, I had an imaginary friend and I named her Cora.
Mm-hmm.
My mother said to me, "She was real to you." And I played with her for years till really I'm the oldest, till my younger siblings kind of, were able to talk and play and stuff. But she was my constant companion. Yeah. And then, when she reminded me of Cora, I did ask one day, all of a sudden, like the light bulb goes on and the voice is talking to me and I'm like, "Are you Cora?"
Yes.
And the voice says, "Yes, I've always been Cora to you." Is she my primary? Okay.
No, she's not your primary spirit guide.
Okay.
But Cora is your spiritual spirit guide and your creative spirit guide. Anything coming from the higher realm will just be known as Cora.
Okay.
So
yeah.
It is coming from different places though. Cora
Okay.
as her spirit guide state of being is in the 5th dimension. But Cora is relaying information and advice and healing and intervention, everything to your benefit for the highest good for all concerned. Still feels pretty strong that everything that started from your childhood was your birth relationship to your father. It is not just a family of origin. There is a higher spiritual relationship between your soul and your father's soul, in the sense that in learning to love and forgive and understand with compassion, anything of your father equates to anything in yourself.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the spiritual message of the relationship between you and your father being at the crux of everything in your life, including the whole series of stories that you shared with us today. It really still centers on the estrangement between you and your father, when we're actually talking sameness, not otherness.
Yeah.
But sameness.
Yeah.
Does that help?
It does. Okay. Yeah. And I have learned, Anjali and Mark, that, we can connect to source, to our angels, to God, whatever word we want to use for the divine. But until we learn to love ourselves, it's very hard for us to receive that love. And that's the love that brings the joy and the healing. And so that's a part of the deal.
It feels to me that you're surrendering through everything you tried to control and everything you tried to manage, and all the things that you did succeed in doing. I think when you surrendered, you might not have known it at a conscious level at that time, but I think your soul knew exactly what it was surrendering to and why it was surrendering, what it was surrendering for.
My son is very computer-minded, very scientific, very computer-minded, and that's sort of what he likes and what he believes in. And there was one day that he can build a computer. He can tell you every component in it. I don't know any of that stuff. But one day his computer froze up, couldn't get it to do anything. And I said, unplug it and plug it back in. And he said, but there's no reason why that would work. That's just not how electronics work. So he tried everything, and then finally he unplugged it and plugged it back in. Boom, came on perfect. And he said, well, how did you know? How did you know? And I said, well, that's faith. I said, what you know is important, but you also have to know that when that doesn't work, you have to have a little bit of faith. And that's why I'm plugging it and plugging it in, even though there's no reason why it should work. If you have faith in it, it will work.
Right. Because here in the 3rd dimension, we are here to make choices, definitive, and to take actions that serve, and certainly are pointed from wisdom to wisdom. And the moment we turn the idea of a faith in something higher and we stop taking action and responsibility, in our way of looking at it, in an Akashic way of looking at it, that is considered abdicating your own authority, abdicating your own responsibility. No one's going to help anyone who isn't helping themselves.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's really, really interesting to see the feeling of agency, spiritual agency, personal inner power. And it's like a three-legged stool where each of the three legs, the third leg is faith.
Yeah.
And in order for the stool to sit level in perfect harmony and perfect balance, anytime that I have found myself truly struggling, I always remember to ask. I always remember to ask the higher realm. And I usually ask the higher realm after I've grappled with it myself. I tend not to just default or defer.
Yeah.
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 So that helps me remember. That helps me remember that whatever is our personal and innate power, we are actually given that as agents. We are agencies of that spiritual power.
To me, it's kind of like a dance. Instead of dancing by myself, I dance with friends.
Right.
And it goes a lot easier.
Exactly. And then instead of feeling that you have to do everything by yourself and create everything by yourself, you really do enter into the space and the river of flow of co-creation. So I think that's all the time that we have for today.
Thank you very much, Angelique. Thank you very much, Mark. It was really nice to talk with you both.
It was a pleasure to have you. We're the one who's honored.
Good night.
Good night.
Does your daughter have a friend from childhood she's been thinking about that's no longer with us?
A young man, 20, passed away from a brain tumor.
He's saying he came out of fifth dimension. He came through sixth dimension, and are you working with Christ? Are you working with Christ right now? Yes.
Yeah, that's what he told me.
He's with him.
I know. I mean, that's incredible. I've written everything out.
Okay.
He asked me, his dad, who also has a lot of faith, but of course is not happy with God for taking his son at the age of 20.
Exactly.
And his dad was suffering in March. Yeah. And he got in touch with me and asked me to share a message with his dad, but
It's been sort of messing with the electronics there for a while. So that's what kind of gave me the sort of tip to check in, you know?
Okay. What he is trying to explain to me is that his role and reason in this lifetime for his mother and his father is braided. Again, so we're back to that braided piece, is braided with what they also needed to learn in their life lesson. Is their life lesson surrounding loss versus recovery? Yes. So their Akashic
Dad,
go ahead, Mark.
Dad had come to terms with it because he doesn't have a choice. Otherwise, it's not faith.
Yeah.
Yeah. So loss versus recovery as an Akashic lesson is only learned by what Mark said. He's kind of telling you, he's not telling his father this, he's kind of telling you,
okay,
Rebecca, that if Dad doesn't get it, then the whole purpose will have been lost in this lifetime. So he knew when he was incarnating that he wasn't going to have a super long. How old did you think you were going to be when this life would be cut short? Was it under the age of 10? Was it under the age of 20? So 10 plus how much? He thought he was supposed to die at 11 or 12. So the fact that he continued to live through to age 20, whatever was going to take him at the age of 11 or 12 didn't, because they must have seen that it wasn't the right time, right? For the parent to learn, to learn the lesson.
Can you restate that Akashic lesson for me?
Loss versus recovery.
Okay.
The only way the lesson of loss versus recovery is learned is through an inherent faith and acceptance of divine order. So he knew before he was born, that he wasn't going to have a long life. He thought he was going to live to age 11 or 12. And something was supposed to happen at 11 or 12, but an intervention came in because whatever state of mind or state of being the parents were in at that time, the lesson was sure to be lost.
Yeah.
So they allowed him to continue on, which meant something had to change on his timeline. And that's where the brain cancer just became a thing. It literally just became the thing to transfer out of dimension. Okay. So what he is trying to say, and his sayers about, I want you to rethink this atheist thing, is he doesn't want life to be wasted for not getting it. Anders is still young, but his father being much older, if he doesn't come to terms with it or have his own opening, it's not an enlightenment, it's not a lightning bolt. All it is,
it's not even necessarily a Christian thing.
It's not even a Christian thing. That's right.
You have to believe in something. Yeah.
And all of those kinds of things that relate to divine order, that we're here for each other's learning. We're not here for our own lives. We're here for each other's lives. And yes, we're having our own at the same time. So it's kind of like two flies in one strike. But the point is the reality is, the only reason we have family of origins and we have neighbors and we have colleagues and we have community is because this is by way of how Akashic lessons can play out in third dimension. It has to be through engagement and interaction with the apparent sense of self versus other. So Mark's right. It's not just a Christian thing.
Yeah.
But the saying is, I am with Christ right now. And Christ is also saying, this is not a Christian thing.
Yeah.
This is a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's going to be stuff like this, Rebecca, where conversations with Cora are going to come through. You may not ever be able to, but maybe you can, and the timing will be right and you will get the signal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if for any reason, if not, then it becomes a portion in a chapter, conversations with Cora. Change the names to protect the innocent, that kind of thing. But the story and the lesson and the communication can still be given word for word without mentioning a single person's name.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
You're welcome. Yeah. Blessings be upon you.
Yeah. Yeah.
He said, I did my part. He said,
Yeah.
I did my part. That was my part.